Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Welcome to this Telit webinar, How to Prepare Your Cellular IoT-Enabled Device for Global Launch, a use case for Smart City Pest Control. I'm Amanda Flink, the Head of Global Events here at Telit, and I will be moderating today's event. Before we get started, we'd like to understand your experience with global deployments of IoT-enabled solutions. So if you could please take a second to fill out the poll question, which you should see on your screen now. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. To explain this topic today, I am pleased to be joined by Mads Kring, the Senior Director for Nordics and Baltics at Telit, and by Stig Lungseth, CEO at TrapMe. Just before I hand it over to Mads to start our presentation, I have a few quick reminders for our audience. I would like to encourage you to interact by posting questions. We will have time to answer some of those at the end of our presentation. Simply submit a question by posting in the box to the right of the slides. Also, please be sure to check out the resources section in the upper right-hand corner of your screen for some additional information on today's topic. Finally, we will send out a replay link to all attendees at the conclusion of this webinar. And with that, Mads, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. So good afternoon. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Mads Kring, based out in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I'm a Senior Director of Sales here in Telit. I've been working in the European sales team in Telit since 2005. And just to take you back, back in those days, 2G, GSM, GPS modules and machine-to-machine communication end-to-end made our day. To a large extent, machine-to-machine was point-to-point communication, largely backed by SMS text messages. Nowadays, IoT, Internet of Things, connected things, is an integral part of our daily life, even to the point that I think most of us no longer pay any specific attention to the intelligent traffic light, the automated sprinkler, pay-as-you-go services, etc., etc. So, today, as part of the Global Telit webinar series, I'm pleased to kick off this high-level presentation for an interesting IoT use case that, and I have to say unfortunately, is relevant in many parts of the world today. I think we have all heard about the smart home, smart city, and other smart spaces. While most of those words are created and used loosely and ad hoc, SmartX has been elevated by many analysts and industry experts as a market movement with a vision to bring about change and acceleration to the evolution in the way we, as a society, live, work, take care of ourselves, and care for our environment and surroundings, and how we make or grow the things we need. Typically, the SmartX mantra and directive is, think digital first and make it absolutely connected. That calls for and also requires that for any SmartX space, the entire solution ecosystem be captured digitally. Meaning that whatever benefit is being delivered, this is derived from an integrated data networks including sensors, data transport, storage, analysis, and other systems ending at or a user at, or in a lot of cases now, in a machine or a device. And to make matters interesting, this usually requires bespoke data being more or less real time. The smart city movement itself is one of the original SmartX. It's tracked by Makina Research since 2015, at which point the firm estimated that 168 million connections were about. In the recent reports, they forecast smart city to grow at a 25% compounded annual growth rate through 2025, at which point it will reach 1.6 billion connections, aka 400 million units. Makina sees the ecosystem composed of three solution areas: smart city applications, such as street light, water, parking, and key city operations which touch smart city applications that include monitoring, reporting, and sustainability. Finally, citizen services rounds up the solution areas addressing emergency services, public Wi-Fi, general notifications, among others. Relevant for today's discussion, an estimated of those 24% of those 1.6 billion connections in 2025 will be LPWA technology. In this LPWA technology ecosystem, Telit contributes modules, global roaming data plans, also known as SIM card subscriptions, and platform device management services to providers in a variety of areas. You can see a few examples on the left-hand side. So these could be waste management from Big Belly, emergency response and services of Cradlepoint, digital signage with Accentia, these bus stops, emergency response, company electric ride sharing. And I think, as you will see later in this presentation today, some quite neat and carefully engineered connected rodent traps from the Danish company TrapMe. So from a holistic view, what are the trends impacting the things on the Internet of Things? Here are a few buzzwords that governs any kind of 2021 discussion on the connected thing across all smart X verticals. I tried to summarize some takeaways. So the takeaways could be the following. The cellular IoT market is evolving super fast, and the transition to 5G IoT is a natural ingredient in the planning of such a deployment. This is what we're facing every day. There's also a bunch of disruptive technologies that really scale up IoT these days. I want to mention two of them that are relevant and that Telit is involved with. First of all, the general low power wide area technology to reach further with less power consumption to exchange minimum amount of data. That's really the fundamental story of low power wide area. The other technology is IUICC, which in effect is an EUICC software that runs in a dedicated security enclave of the module alongside the processor and the modem on a purpose-built SoC. Now, this sounds complicated, right or wrong. This is often referred as soft SIM. Another takeaway is the clear need of creating solutions that are resilient to cybersecurity threats, for sure in the smart city arena, and in the IoT space, to have more intelligence and control on the edge becomes super vital. On the flip side of this trending IoT wave that were mentioned on the previous slide, it's absolutely fair to be aware and navigate carefully around some of the roadblocks and reasons for failure. Everyone in the industry is scrambling to participate in this fast-moving market space. Fast time to market is key. And in that light, end customers demand mature edge solutions to have an easy and streamlined logistics of, for instance, the provisioning flow. And this is exactly what Telit is all about. My 15 years experience in the machine-to-machine IoT industry resonates very well with Microsoft findings. Microsoft, being the source of this survey, does touch upon some of these potential obstacles for a successful IoT product introduction. And may I say, they are brutal reality also in the smart city ecosystem. Therefore, in particular with regards to the cellular IoT solution providers, some further considerations across multiple corporate C-level disciplines are required to bridge the challenge. Basically to, basically to avoid the roadblocks. As an example, the lower bandwidth constraints of LPWA in combination with the units operated on very simple primary battery packs, this may call for a complete rethink on CTO level on the overall architecture level of the solution. And to overview and define the most efficient device management ecosystem in terms of provisioning and remote management for a full life cycle, that could be years, many years, of the IoT product, this becomes a fundamental for the optimized total cost of ownership that resides under the CFO responsibility. And finally, but surely not to be forgotten, it's fairly easy, 15 years of experience, I've seen many times, fairly easy to manage tens of units in the field, especially if they are in the close vicinity. But scaling up to a large and spread all around deployment, this is a complete different scenario that is under the COO wings. Telit is addressing these cellular IoT pain points by introducing OneEdge, offered as a software as a service directly on the module. Although this award-winning OneEdge offering does deserve a dedicated session, this will be for another day and another forum, but I welcome you to check it out. But just to put a few more words into this slide, which is around OneEdge, this is running on a standardized, lightweight end-to-end protocol. OneEdge brings to you some of the following highlights. It's an out-of-the-box, zero-touch provisioning. Developers can create edge solutions without using high-end MCUs, microcontrollers. It reduces cost for integration into a public and private cloud backend. There are out-of-the-box solutions on hand. It ensures the end-to-end, this is important, it ensures end-to-end security from device to cloud. It overcomes the complexity of the thing identity management. It simplifies lifecycle management for large-scale IoT deployments. For instance, and very relevant, managing FOTA, firmware over the air, of module and/or application. And it streamlines logistics of connectivity onboarding and thus reduces BOM, bill of material costs for the application. What we're talking about today with LTE-M, Cat-M1, this is also on the path to 5G IoT. So the so-called enhanced machine type communication of the 3GPP standardization for 5G radio. So this is really on the forefront of 5G IoT. Telit has followed this evolution in the licensed LPWA space since the early days of release 13 back in 2016. June 2016 was the sign-off. So truly, cellular is core of our business. And although the standards are signed and sealed what seems years ago, Telit is really on the forefront of introducing new module technology to this IoT space, more or less in parallel with the network and infrastructure that's becoming alive. So that's the ecosystem talking about. To translate into some use cases, LTE and 5G are really the first true IoT cellular base for massive global deployment, as shown in the previous slide. So Telit is following both in the broadband space, which for the audience here means the higher data speed, the so-called high Cat, LTE Cat4 and above technologies, while the emphasis of smaller size, IoT focused, low speed, and the reduced power consumption, by the way, with a high sensitivity on the RF, resonates extremely well with LTE-M, Cat M1, and as well within narrowband IoT. So first generation TrapMe is already deployed widely in tens of thousands of units in the EU market, leveraging on the 2G GSM G4S technology modules from Telit, and including the SIM-wise integrated SIM functionality. Now I can say from personal experience that the TrapMe trap does hurt when operated by a clumsy set of fingers, but outside those personal experiences, what I can say for sure is that the device runs from a primary cell, AA cell, that gives in the 2G arena plus 3-year lifetime, which is much more than the initial spec. But let's turn to the future, and the future is towards LTE in the 3GPP new standards. And let's hear now from Stig Lyngsø, what are the future plans to embrace this new technology and the efforts learned so far in the smart city ecosystem. So thanks a lot from my side.
All right, let's see if we get it started. So thank you, Matt. And as mentioned, my name is Stig Lyngsø. I am the CEO of TrapMe, and I'm going to talk a bit about just who we are and what it is that we do, and see if I can paint a picture of what the pest control industry is and how urbanization and smart city evolution starts to influence this industry, and also how we have approached connectivity with Telit as a partner. So who we are, well, TrapMe started out as being a product of a company called CB Svendsen. But in April last year, we decided to extract the TrapMe product and create its own legal entity. Now CB Svendsen is a major shareholder and also our R&D partner on the hardware development. And we wanted to do that because we see the TrapMe solutions and products as a software as a service company. So we are offering a platform where not just our own devices connect, but other pest control smart devices can connect to it. Some will connect through the Telit connectivity as a provider, and others through web services and API connections. But every time that we develop hardware, it is done through cooperation with the pest controllers. So we only sell to certified professional pest control industry customers. We do not sell to consumers. And we have more than, we have proof of product. We have more than 25,000 traps in the Scandinavian market alone out in the field being active. We are located in various places. So we have 3 offices in Denmark. We have some marketing office in Ukraine, and our software development team is based out of Bangladesh. So this whole pandemic, having to work remote on Teams and on all the other platforms is fine with us. We have been doing it for a while now. Our mission is that we wish to help the pest control industry to digitize the ways of operating. Pest control industry, as I'm going to talk about later, is shown to be very conservative and very paper-driven, and we wish to enable and give them some platforms and some devices that can automate and help them digitize the ways of operating. And the vision is to become the global leading provider of these type of software as a service platform for the pest control industry. But what is pest control management? So pest control management, you could say, is the regulation or the management of species, which we as humans find to have a negative impact on our activities, or if they become a health hazard to us, we define them as being pests. And it may be any member of the animal kingdom, as long as the impact is adversely towards the human activities. And pests are becoming an increasing problem, and more types of animals are starting to be defined as pests. We see that, for example, when rural areas start to get cultivated and humans start to move in on what was former wildlife territories, but the wildlife has not yet realized that they have been expropriated. Now suddenly they seem to become a pest for us, which were previously just wildlife that weren't a pest. And pest control measures are often also part of an integrated pest management strategy, and it is typically almost always carried out by professional pest controllers on the behalf of a customer. And you need to be certified to do this because you might be dealing with pests that can carry all kinds of nasty diseases. And you might also be handling some pretty nasty poisons. So you need to know what you're doing and be educated and trained in it. And pests, I think we all know, they affect both domestic household as well as a range of different industries. And each industry segment has its own way of managing and putting strategies into how to handle and combat these pests. The pest control industry on a global view is estimated to be about almost $23 billion here in 2021, expected to reach $29.1 billion by 2026. So it's a good market to be in. The compound annual growth rate is estimated to be about 5.1%. So it's definitely a market where there's a lot of potential and it keeps on growing. The market drivers, there are different market drivers for the pest control industry, but one of the major market drivers that I think is very interesting and worth focusing on is the urbanization and what happens when an area starts to get urbanized. So today we are about 7 billion people on the planet, and of which roughly half, 3.5 billion, are estimated to live in urban areas and cities. But by 2035, we are estimated to be almost 10 billion people, and more than 7 billion are expected to be living in larger cities and urban areas. And along with the urbanization, we also see an increase in the working class population. We see an increase in the number of working women. And as the living standards increase and the economical platforms or the economical standards increase, the tolerance for pests has a tendency to decrease. And as urbanization expands the cities, the industries also follows. And with the industries also comes the pests. So the bigger the cities, the more pests that will be present, the more work for us and for the pest control operators. And then there are also governmental rules and regulations that drives the market. More and more regions, states, and countries, they start to or they plan to ban the use of pesticides and rodenticides because we do not want our crops sprayed with pesticides, and we do not want the rodenticides spread into the nature, the rodenticides used towards, for example, rats and mice. We don't want that in our nature as it gets into other parts of the wildlife, which we do not want to kill, we want to preserve that. And in fact, in the state of in the state of California, they actually enforced a law prohibiting the use of rodenticides. It became effective 1st of January this year. So that means that the pest control industry in California, they need to look at alternative solutions when fighting rodents. And this is where a solution like TrapMe rat trap comes into play, because if you start to exchange poison with physical traps, then you need to regularly visit these traps to check for kills. But that also gives you a lot of driving around on all the different customers you have with all the traps in order to abide to the service level agreements that you most likely have made with your customers. So by implementing smart IoT traps, the system, the platform will let the pest controller know which trap to visit, and thus saving time, saving fuel, reducing the carbon dioxide footprint of the company. So all in all, positive outlooks. If we look at the North American space, the US in particular, we have seen some interesting tendencies here during the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So how big is the problem with these rodents actually? The statistics that we see from the US National Pest Management Association show that there has been a significant increase in rodent sightings at domestic homes. It's actually up by 147% when we compare 2019 with 2020. And the COVID-19 pandemic, it definitely has impacted us. For example, the behavior of the rats have changed. As the food supplies became scarce, the restaurants closed, the waste bags were not put on the sidewalks, etc., etc. That changed the behavior of the rats to become far more aggressive in their search for food. And in fact, the aggressive rodent behavior reportings, they are up 184% in 2020 compared to 2019. And it became totally crazy in April to May last year. The reportings of the aggressive behavior boomed with an increase of more than 1,000%. So who are fighting these pests? Well, The pest controllers or the certified pest control companies are the ones that are out there fighting them. But this industry is dominated to a large extent by small to medium-sized pest management companies, and then are a few global large enterprises. The small companies, they are typically conservative in the way of operating the business. Their business model is based on the same approach they've been using for tens of years, and they are far more paper-driven. They have to do all kinds of reporting when they've been on a site and done inspections and done built-in inspections and visits. But the global enterprises, they are starting to move into a more digital platform, using more digital tools and IoT-related hardware devices. The devices that are being used when we exclude the use of poisons are dominated by a range of mechanical solutions, some more ingenious than others. I've found some here on the net. We have the drawing with the pistol is actually a US patented solution from back in the 19th century. These are not the ones that are being used, I should stress, because the solutions today need to be of a standard where it gets a humane kill. So the industry is looking at not just killing, in this case, a rat, a rodent. We need to do it in a humane way where we ensure that they die quickly. So looking at the business model of the pest control industry, as I mentioned, it is dominated by these manual processes, which means that the business model is based on a reactive approach to the market. And I've been wondering what will happen to these companies when the city starts to grow, and with the expansion and the incorporation of smart city solutions that comes. Well, as cities evolve, we're going to see companies like Amazon start to find it worthwhile to enter that area, to enter that city. And what happens when a company like Amazon enters a region? Well, they raise the bar for the customer service expectation. The consumers and the customers, they start to expect this one-day shop, one-day delivery experience that they get with companies like Amazon. And in that experience, they get used to being communicated to and kept informed through automated digital processes. But that is not the experience that today is delivered by the pest control industry. And therefore, I believe that we will start to see a change in the business model of pest control industry, driven by the changes that is happening with the urbanization, as happening with the cities and the smart cities. As we get more and more smart devices, more and more product as a service into these regions, we are going to see a change that in the pest control business model. And if we look at the top 5 potential disrupting business model that were cited like just only 2 years ago, then we see that when you start to offer product as a service and combine that with personalization and customization of the customer experience, then you start to disrupt industries that are still operating conservative and are mostly based on manual processes, because they cannot keep up with the whole information flow that the customer starts to expect and the service they start to expect. And we at TrapMe, we believe that the industry needs new solutions that will enable the pest controller to deliver that customer experience which the customers are expecting when they live in a smart city. And we will need to be able to deliver that detailed and timely information that the customer feels they need to have in order to feel secure that their service provider deliver as agreed upon in the service level agreement that were made with the customer. And that is why we believe that we in the coming years will see a change in the business model of the professional pest controllers. They're going to move their businesses from a manual and reactive model into a more digital and proactive model. And eventually, when we start to collect enough data, it will become a more predictive world for the pest control. So when the big data starts to be analyzed, we can start to do modeling trends and predict pest behaviors and when to expect outbreaks and where to expect outbreaks. And now some of the large enterprise companies, they are actually already working on these big data analysis, but the majority of the industry is still on the react business model. So in order for the pest control companies to change the business model and the services offered, they will need to look, I believe, at incorporating digital platforms and IoT-based devices. And of course, I need to stress that this will not replace the need for a professional pest controllers in the field experience, but it will give the pest controllers tools to deliver that expectation of services and to enable remote monitoring and to predict when to set in before it becomes a full-fledged infestation of, for example, rats. So looking at digitization and IoT in Europe, what has the challenges been? And how do you go about bringing IoT solution into a conservative market? Well, our experience from Europe shows us that it is very much dependent upon the region that you act in and what the public agenda on IoT is in that given region or that given country. If we look at Scandinavia, that's Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, marked with orange on the map. IoT has been on the public agenda for the past 10 years at least, and many of the larger cities and municipalities in those countries, they are working actively on creating smart city solutions. So we see IoT center projects like Mads mentioned on public waste bins, water management solutions, indoor environment sensors, traffic regulation sensors, and so on and so forth. But most of this push is driven by the progressive government who have a green agenda and focus on circular economy, which then spreads to the municipalities who then ask for smart solutions. And we also see in these regions that the telcos has actually pushed hard on partnerships with IoT solution providers. And they're doing a lot to inform the public on the different types of connectivity that are available and of the different solutions and smart city solutions that are there and that are coming. So public awareness makes it easier for companies like us to sell our products, as the customers in these regions are not, I would say, scared to pick up new tech solutions because they've seen or heard about it on a regular basis in the news. And this is also why we believe that our sales numbers in the Scandinavian region has been so good, because there we believe we have hit what's in this figure is called the pragmatist part of the adoption curve. But what about the rest of Europe? Well, here we still have to make an effort, and one of the effort is to explain to the customers the differences in the available technologies. As we just saw, Matthew mentioned a lot of different connectivity technologies, and in the southern part, in the other parts of Europe and in Scandinavia, the focus is very much on the price of the connection and not as much on the value of the solution. And then we have some regions like the Benelux, which is dominated with solutions on the LoRa and the Sigfox network. And these pest control solutions on these networks, they work fine, but these may not work in other countries because the LoRa and the Sigfox do not have complete coverage in the other countries. So the sheer number of available connectivity solutions are obscuring the pictures for the customers, for the pest control customers. And it ranges from Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and 2G and LoRa and NB-IoT and so on and so forth. And there are pros and cons, obviously, to all the connectivity solutions available. And TrapMe, we chose to start with running on the 2G network, and done that for a couple of years. It has had the upside of the devices being able to roam in all the countries, meaning that we can sell the same device in all of the countries we have colored on this picture. But it also has the downside of signal penetration, as our devices are sometimes placed in basements or put into metal bait boxes that dampens the signal. And if we look at something like our sewer trap solution, then we really get signal penetration issues when you install a sewer rat trap beneath the concrete, beneath the road and the asphalt and whatnot. So this and the fact that the 2G network is marked for termination at some point not too far in the future for Europe. I don't know when. I keep trying to ask Mads when he thinks it will happen, but I don't think anyone can give a clear answer. But that made us decide last year in 2020 to have a look at new technologies for connectivity. We therefore consulted Telit to figure out which of all these available connectivity solutions that are best for us to choose. And we told Telit that we are looking for a solution that will minimize the number of product versions that we need to run. We do not want to have to change SIM cards to get connectivity in a region. We still want to use the embedded SIM solution that we have. And we need to have low power consumption, and it's not a lot of data that we need to transfer. And then looking at these new technologies, we also started to think about the other markets other than Europe, and if it's possible to cover both the North American and the European market with the same solution. But does it make sense to go to the North American market? Well, given the numbers that we just showed you on the US rodent pest issues, and that the market is actually dominating the global pest control revenue with almost 50% of the share, and the fact that we believe the US is progressive, I mean, at least in states like California, when it comes to the environment, then it definitely does make sense to look at a solution that can cover both the North American region as well as the European region. And we also see in the US that the larger pest control product development companies like Bell Laboratories, they start to bring digital solutions to the market. And that makes a push in market. And therefore, we believe that 2022 is the right time for us to introduce our TrapMe solutions to the US market. And I think Massey mentioned that time to market is essential, or time to market is king. So we are busy getting our solutions to the market. But how difficult is it to take our European solution onto the US market? Can we get connectivity? How much work do we need to do to get data from our servers, or get data from North America into our servers, etc.? And so that brings me back to the dialogue that we have with Telit on the technologies to choose for the future. At first, we were actually keen on the narrowband IoT connectivity due to what we had heard about the signal penetration capabilities. But that solution, as we understood, has the downside of having to manage different SIM cards for each different region, and that's what we do not want to do. So we wanted, as I said, a solution where we can reduce the number of product versions while still covering Europe and North America. And guided by Telit, we decided to go with the LTE Cat-M1 connectivity solution as the right choice for us, but with a fallback possibility for NB-IoT and for 2G. Oh, sorry, I forgot to change the, it should have been this slide. Apologies. So in Q4 2020, we ordered the first of these chipsets from Telit, and then we started building the first test versions. And we also got help from Telit's engineers when we started working on the firmware. We developed our own firmware, but on the communication device, we sometimes need a bit of help and guidance, and Telit engineers were great at helping us. So we got the new chipsets up and running, and had successful trials in Europe. And when we had the successful trials in Europe, we were ready to start testing in the US. And just how do you go about testing on another continent in the middle of a corona pandemic where traveling is prohibited? With our devices, we need to have hands-on in a new market. So we needed hands-on in the US because our traps, they need to be physically armed. They need to be disarmed. We need to simulate a rodent catch. And that means we need someone to be mindful of the fingers and then arm and disarm and work with our devices. And then we need to monitor and to see if our firmware gets our data through to our European servers. And here again, Telit stepped in and offered to help us. So we were allowed to send devices to two Telit office facilities, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. And this was great because quite quickly we actually got what we call a heartbeat from the devices in both North Carolina and in California. And after some tweaks back and forth on the firmware and the setup, we actually also started to receive what we call events. That's our terminology for receiving data showing open, closed, catch status. We got our battery status in. We got signal strength through. We also have temperature measurements in our devices. So we actually could measure it as it was like it was deployed in a field and we could simulate having caught a rodent. So we now have good data in both Durham, North Carolina, as well as in the Foothill Ranch in California. So finally, summing up, our current status is that now we have one of our solutions that has proven to work on the new LTE Cat M1 technology. It enables us to go ahead with that technology for the rest of our solutions and bring that not just to the European market, but also to the US market with the same chipset. And we're also now starting to apply for all the certifications, insurances, and whatever needed to enter the US market. And I think we can conclude that with the help of Telit, we are able to bring a new version of our primary product to both our existing European market as well as the US market at a much faster pace than if we had to do it alone. So that really goes with what Matt said, fast time to market is king. And I think for me, it would be very interesting to see if the adoption in the US market is going to exceed the adoption in the EU market, and also if the business models of the pest control management industry will actually start to change as we predict. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mads and Steve. Really, really great information here. Before we get to the questions, I am going to drop just one last poll for our audience. If you'd like to have one of our experts contact you directly, please feel free to respond here on the poll and we will have someone reach out. We now do have time for some questions, and we've gotten quite a few coming in through the inbox. There's still time to ask a question, so please feel free to submit using the box to the right of the slides, and we'll do our best to cover it in the time we've got left. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in here. The first question we've got, are the roaming services coverage and associated charges of the LTE-M attractive for low data IoT applications in general?
So I think this one I can answer from Matt from Telit here. It's a good question, and the answer is yes. In reality, the number of live LTE networks across the world is increasing by the day. Today, 20 live networks are available. Tomorrow will be 21, so to speak. So this is adding day by day. And here the IoT connectivity offering that we are putting inside the module as a SIM-wise offering will work both on the LTE network as well as in the 2G network where that still is around. So North America is all good to go on LTE. It's a full network available coast to coast, north to south. This is not the case in Europe, and we need still to rely on 2G network. But regardless of what network type is behind, the global connectivity offer we are putting in place allows you to do a sub 50 cent or something per month subscription with a 1 megabyte data, which is perfectly fine. So typically this is very well received by customer base, and thanks to the 2G coverage, there is a coverage today. And with the LTE coverage tomorrow, there is a coverage for tomorrow. So that's the story.
Great, thank you. Next question, and I believe this one is for Steve. What are the main business drivers for a municipality to switch from regular plastic traps to your technology?
Well, and that varies from country to country actually, but for the municipalities in Scandinavia, there are, like in California, governmental regulations saying that the use of rodenticide is prohibited. So that is one of the drivers that they want to make sure that they need to reduce the use of rodenticides. But a lot of the municipalities around Europe are also starting to have this, as I mentioned, circular economy, approach and want to profile themselves as being green and environmentally eco-friendly. So that's one of the reasons that they would want to change the use of rodenticides to Tesco traps. But then I think one of the questions is also why go with a more expensive, obviously smart trap than with a simple non-digital trap. Well, one of the reasons for that is that with a non-digital trap, as I said, you need to go and make sure that you visit regularly. You don't want a dead rat lying let's say in a kindergarten or at a grocery store and whatever. So you want to be warned when there's a catch, and that can also be moved into starting to predict. So we have some municipalities where they put them up in strategic places and start to monitor on the activity. If the number of catches starts to increase, then they know they need to go out and start with the skills of the pest controllers to start investigate what is happening. Are we looking at a coming infestation of rats, and why is this happening? And that might be a simple thing like a hole to a drainage store or a food deposit has suddenly appeared in the door, and now there's an abundance of food that suddenly booms the rats. So the monitoring and the predictiveness is part of the agenda for the municipality. I think that should answer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this question is just a touch further to that one as well. But how big is a deployment, usually in terms of a number of traps that you see, say, like in a major European city?
Oh, yeah. That's also interesting. So it often starts out as a small project. They want to test. So that can be like 25 traps. And then it grows as they get the experience with it, and some municipalities have their own pest controllers, some hire in the services of guys like Rent to Kill and other service providers. But it varies. But typically, you are in several hundreds. I think one of the biggest we have is 1,500 devices, and that is also because they have a harbor area where they use a lot of devices to monitor that area, because a lot of rats exist when you have a harbor and you have shipping and goods and whatnot. So from 400-500 up to about 1,500 is typically a range for a larger municipality. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Mads, I think this one's for you. Why does Telit propose that the same SIM card cannot connect to the IoT networks both in Europe and USA? Is there some type of technology restriction?
Yes, the question is good. Today, the carriers that are providing NB-IoT, specifically NB-IoT, don't really have a roaming agreement set between them. It's a closed community, and therefore, since we are living on the back of true global roaming, this is not today possible in the NB-IoT arena. On the other side, this is possible in the Cat-M1 LTM arena, and this is why our offering goes for the LTM area. Hope this answers the question. Actually, I will just comment on, because Steve mentioned in his presentation as well that it would require a inserting of a local NB-IoT SIM card to run in a local network. And when you have applications such as a rat trap, which is really a part where you don't want to have any openings for entering a SIM card, it rules out this already from the start. And it happens in many of our custom applications.
Great, thank you. Next question I've got. Assuming that the unlicensed spectrum, i.e. LoRa or Sigfox, could have been the selected technology, why would you aim for cellular LTE-M?
Is that for you, Mads?
I think it's for you, because you selected between LoRa and cellular.
Yeah. The reason we didn't choose those is that we see, for example, in Denmark, where I'm from, the Sigfox network has a good coverage, but there's no LoRa, whereas in other regions there's no Sigfox. So I wouldn't know on the technical part that if LoRa or Sigfox had complete coverage in all of Europe, what would be the benefits when we look at that versus the LTE-M? I think that's more for you. But we did not choose LoRa or Sigfox because it doesn't have complete coverage in all the regions we operate in. Did that answer? I don't know, Mads, if you can elaborate on the differences between the
that sounds perfectly correct, and a good choice, by the way.
Okay.
Great. Next question we've got. As far as IoT goes, since there is only a small amount of data usage, what would be the advantage of 5G over 4G LTE or even HSPI?
I think this could be a question for me. So what was the HSPI? That one I don't know, but I can definitely answer towards the 5G and 4G LTE story. This is also a matter of price, performance, power consumption, availability. There's a balance between many things, and also a little bit about the time we're talking about. Today, a 5G technology module is a several $100 thing, which of course completely kills the business case. 2, 3, 4 years down the road, 5G IoT, which is what we need here, will become available, and here the price point will be in the dollar range instead. Today, the LTE-M sits in the 4G LTE kind of space. The 3GPP standard covers them both, so it's a subset of that. And this is where we are emphasizing the IoT space is the people who use the low power wide area LTE-M categories. And as I showed in the slide, the other side of the 4G LTE is the Cat4, which is 20, 30, $40, whatever part. So there are some considerations in that deals with the commercials around it. And of course, whether the technology is built intentionally for low power with power save modes and stuff. This is also part of the equation why clients look at both, but decide for one. One is absolutely more relevant than the other one.
Great, thanks, Mads. Next question I've got. What difficulties did you experience with OTA and device telemetry gathering internationally?
Steve, I think that's you. Or maybe on mute.
Oh, bloody hell, I'm muted. Sorry. Could you read it again, please?
Yeah, no problem. What difficulties did you experience with OTA and device telemetry gathering internationally?
Well, what difficulties did we? Now our experience is now based on the 2G network, and what we experience with that one is, as you know, there are a lot of work going on the 2G network, and sometimes we suddenly lose signal in a region, and for no apparent reason. And we try to investigate what the heck is going on, and eventually we call Telit to see if they can figure out what is wrong. And often it turns out that the local network owner are doing either updates or changes or whatever to some of the masts in the region, and suddenly our devices drop off, and then they come back on again like a week later. I think that's the biggest pain we have had, not being that close to information on what's happening on the network, and being able to go in and on a map and spot where are they going to do upgrades or changes to the 2G network next time, so we in advance can advise our customers that there might be some downtime or some fallouts in that region. It's always, again, back to the business model, it's always reactive when we need to find out what the heck is going on with the 2G network. I think that's the biggest pain we've had.
I want to add something here because it's important in the evolving networks across the world with the LTM networks becoming alive. There are certainly changes happening in the network that all of our IoT customers need to be aware that their unit in the field preferably should be capable of being able to have a firmware update of the module firmware. So we do this through Delta firmware updates, and we do this as an offering inside the OneEdge that I spoke briefly about. So this is an important way to keep the unit in the field up to date with whatever happens in the infrastructure. And requires, by the way, a session with the engineers. This is not something you can do on retrospective mode. You need to design for it.
We have fortunately not have had to do many firmware updates over the year, and when we do, we always touch base with the Telit on it, so and do it in batches.
Great, thanks. I believe that's about all the time we've got for today. I want to remind our audience to please be sure to check your inboxes in the coming days for the replay link. Thank you so much, Mads and Stig, for some great information today. Thank you to all who joined us, and have a great day.